بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعن على أعدائهم أجمعين من عداوتهم إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد والفرقان الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى ثم قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم إني تارك فيكم الثقلين كتاب الله وعترتي وأهل بيتي صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الأمين الكريم السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي هلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت بقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزياراتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين لا سيما أبا الفضل العباس وعلي الأكبر صلوات
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Those of you who watched the documentary yesterday, it was shown on DM Digital about 11:30 last night. We have the copies. It's not copies, it's the originals. These are not copies, they're actually from the people who actually made the film. So we have copies available for our brothers who would like to buy them. They are £5 each and they are genuine copies. They're not being copied from a computer. So they're being made by professionals and sold by professionals. So if anybody wants to buy these, they're £5 and see the doctor afterwards. So afterwards, if anybody wants to see the copies are over there, and there's a doctor, so see the doctor afterwards for these copies. And for the ladies who are listening as well, if they can send one of the boys with the money to buy the copy, we will send the copies through. I basically finished yesterday, and I don't want to go over it because the subject was difficult to understand, and it's a subject which many people have not even come across. So perhaps it needs going over again with some perhaps more information on this subject. But the point which I was trying to make yesterday is this, is that even in the smallest, minutest of details, the Muslims have copied the past nations. We have copied the Jews and the Christians in the footsteps which they have taken. Now, there's a hadith which I heard just before I came to the Majlis today on television. Mawla Tahir al-Qadi narrated this hadith from Mu'ajjam al-Awsat, volume 4, and in it he was talking about the Ahl al-Bayt. He said that anybody who hates the Ahl al-Bayt, anybody who shows enmity towards the Ahl al-Bayt, he will be raised as a Jew in the hereafter. Anybody who hates the Ahl al-Bayt or shows enmity towards them, he will be raised on Yawm al-Qiyamah amongst the Jews. And somebody asked the Prophet, even though they've done prayer, salat, hajj, and the Prophet said, yes, even though they have done all these acts, if they hate the Ahlul Bayt, they will go to Jahannam indeed, but they'll be raised as Jews. I recited to you a couple of days back an ayat of Ali Imran which said that some of the Jews change words from their context. It's from Surah Al-Nisa, ayat number 46, sorry. It says that some of the Jews change the context of some of the verses of the Holy Scriptures. In Urdu we call it qarina. If you change the qarina, you change the context. Now, today's discussion is about this very subject of changing context. Some words in Islam are Islamic. Salat is Islamic because it's mentioned in the Quran. And what we understand by Salat is by praying. And Salat in Arabic itself means dua. But the Sharia, the Prophet had taught us that Salat has to be done like this. And he has taught us the way of Salat. So Salat has a religious meaning. Now, in Islam, something was done deliberately by the Muslims. Like the Jews have changed the words out of their context, the Muslims have done the same. I'll give you a few examples. What do we understand by the word Khalifa? Khalifa. Now, if I want to find out from basic sources what Khalifa means, I have to look at the Quran. What's the Quran say? It says, Allah says about Hazrat Adam al-Islam, Inni ja'alun fil arzi khalifa. Allah says this in the Quran about Hazrat Adam al-Islam. What is Allah doing? He is appointing His nominee, His vicegerent, His representative on earth as a Khalifa. So He is Khalifatullah. He is the Khalifa of Allah. Yes? Does that make sense? This is what the terminology of Khalifa is. Now, how are the Muslims looking at the word Khalifa? Muslims as a whole are trying to give it similarity in meaning to the same meaning as Allah has given the meaning to Hazrat Adam al-Islam. How? In the Prophet's time, if anybody claimed, the Prophet is not claiming, if anybody after the Prophet claims that I am his Khalifa, what does that mean? That means that the Prophet has nominated him, because that is the only concept of a Khalifa. It has to be nominated by the person whom is nominated by. You cannot say, for example, if I say that my son is my heir, is the inheritor, that is true. But anybody other than my son, can he claim that? No. So the heir of anybody has to come from the source itself. Now, if the Prophet had nominated somebody, then that one person is Khalifatullah or Khalifatul Rasul. Because nobody can claim to be a Khalifa of somebody when the person himself doesn't know. If the Prophet does not know that Fla is a Khalifa, how can they claim to be the Khalifas? Now, what happened? They knew this. They knew there was a problem here. That the word Khalifa what was understood amongst the Arabs of that time was this, that the word Khalifa means the direct inheritor of the message of his inheritance, was this concept of Khalifa. And this was understood amongst the Arabs. The Arabs understood this absolutely. There was no other meaning to word Khalifa amongst the Arabs of the times of the Prophet or even after the Prophet. So they had to resolve this problem. So what they did is they deliberately called themselves Khalifatul Rasul. Khalifatul Rasul. Khalifatul Rasul. And this name stuck. This name stuck. It continued. It continued. Bani Abbas, Bani Umayyah, the Usmani, they came as well. And again the name stuck. They also called themselves Khalifatul Rasul, Khalifatul Rasul. So the Muslims had to resolve this problem. So what they did is this. They now tried to limit this word because the word lost its meaning. The word Khalifa lost its meaning. So they had to define it into a shorter context. They lost the original meaning, but because they made it so expansive, the meaning, they lost even what they wanted to do. They wanted to limit the meaning and show the people that the people who were elected, selected, or nominated as being the Khalifas of the Prophet. But they ran into a problem because everybody after them called themselves Khalifas as well. So what they did, they put a bracket. They put a bracket and called them Khulafa Rashidin. So that gave them the bracket. It stopped Khulafa Rashidin. But Khulafa Rashidin, that is not an Islamic concept either. But if you ask any Muslim, he will say yes, Khalifa means the inheritor, the Khalifa of the Prophet. But amongst the Arabs, there is no name for a person who is elected as Saqifa. What do you call a person? Arabs are here. What do you call a person who is elected in Saqifa? I talked about this subject with Brother Ali before I done this, and we could not come up with a word. There's no word for a person who has been elected. So what they did, well, the best name which fits this is Khalifa. But the word Khalifa, according to the Quran, has to be from Allah and nominated through His messengers. Only the Prophet can, even he does not have the right. Only Allah can nominate, and the Prophet just pronounces that. So we have one Khalifa of Ghadir and one Khalifa of Saqifa. Now, in order to confuse everybody, they call them the Khalifatul Muslimin and Khalifatul Rasul, so that people get confused. And the confusion is even to this day. The word now, Imam. Exactly the same thing was done. The word Imam is an Islamic terminology which even the prophets do not claim to be Imams. Only Hazrat Ibrahim has called, and Allah has called him Imam. How holy is this position of Imam? How holy is it that not even other prophets have claimed to be Imams? Only Hazrat Ibrahim, and our Prophet is an Imam, and the 12 Imams. But what did the Muslims do? They made everybody in every masjid, in every street, an Imam. To confuse everybody, they said everybody in a masjid who's leading the prayers is an Imam. So that the Muslim Ummah loses the value of the word Imam. For the word Imam is the holy name of the representatives of Allah on this earth. This position It's from Allah, Imamat. But what did the Muslims do? They made every street with every masjid, in every country, in every city, about 200 Imams in every city. Why? So that the value of the word Imam finishes amongst the Muslim Ummah. And this is what happened. This is what happened. Because you see on television that everybody is calling themselves Imam. And yet there's only 12 and 2, 14 Imams. Hazrat Ibrahim is an Imam, our Prophet is an Imam, and the 12 Imams. And nobody else dared call themselves Imam. And what did the Muslims do? They made everybody into Imam. Forget the 14, we'll make everybody into Imam from every street. So what did they do? They did this deliberately. This was done deliberately. They changed what? The context. Exactly what Surah Nisa is saying in ayat number 46. That they changed the context of these words. Another example. The word Tarawih. We heard this over and over again. And Muslims think that this is an Islamic name. Tarawih. I ask any of you to read the Quran and read the Quran, the Prophet's Sunnah, and show me anywhere in the Quran, anywhere in the Sunnah of the Prophet, the word Tarawih coming up. The word Tarawih does not appear in Islamic terminology. It doesn't exist. The word Tarawih does not exist in Islamic terminology. This is an invention. So, people today, not through their own fault, because they don't know. They don't know. The word Tarawih, they think, is an Islamic terminology. They think because it was used in the time of the companions, because this word was used in the time of the companions, it must have Islamic meaning to it. But the actual truth to this is no, it has no Islamic connotations. For the people who invented the concept of Tarawih, they brought in another word to put value to the first wrong. Let me explain this. In order to justify their first wrong, they create another wrong concept to prove the first wrong concept. Do you understand? What did they bring out? They brought out this new terminology called bid'atul hasana, which means an innovation which is good. A good bid'at. In Punjabi or Urdu, achhi bid'at. Yani, this word did not exist in the time of the Prophet. Bid'atul hasana did not exist. It had no role to play in Islamic thinking and in Islamic terminology. Because the first was wrong, they had to come out with a second wrong to prove the first wrong. And this two wrongs does not make a right. So the word Tarawih is not an Islamic concept. The word bid'atul hasana is not an Islamic concept. But today, Muslims are of the opinion that these two things are an Islamic concept. Now, this is just an example where the context has been misused. The context of words have been misused. I can give you another example. There's many. Another example is the Ahlul Bayt. Now the Ahlul Bayt, when the Prophet himself says, Allahumma ha'ula wa Ahlul Bayti, oh Allah, these under my cloak are my Ahlul Bayt. But what they have tried to do is try to, Mullah mentioned this is one of his discussions as well, where hadith narrows things down and hadith can widen things. Quran can narrow things down and widen things as well. The Prophet here is showing that who my Ahlul Bayt are. What the Muslims try to do, saying no, whatever the Prophet is saying, we are going to stretch that cloak of Kisar and make it so wide that it tries to encompass the whole, we don't have a problem with this, the wives. And from the wives, it encompasses maybe part of the ummah as well. So instead of saying the Ahlul Bayt being these 5, they say no, it's the households, it's the companions, it's the ummah. And yet the cloak was only amongst these. So again, they have tried to lessen the value of the Ahlul Bayt deliberately. And yet, when I was talking to Mullah, and Mullah was talking to me on this subject as well, is that when we talk to the general Muslim public, when Ahlul Bayt is mentioned, and if you ask them who the Ahlul Bayt are, they will say Pint and Bar. They will say Pint and Bar. But when you come to their Maulvis, they say no, well, Ahlul Bayt, the wives are the Ahlul Bayt. And yes, we also believe that the Pakistan, the 5 holy ones, they are the Ahlul Bayt as well. Something which came to my mind. We went to the Sunni mosque today, and after he had done the prayers and we had some food, he was doing the dua. My Nazir was there, but unfortunately he went after, but we didn't what is that? And he did the dua, and he said, Sadqa 12 imama or 14 masuma. He said these words, 12 imams and the 14 masums. And this clicked in my mind. And we had the food, and I spoke to him afterwards. I said, because he did the nads in praise of Imam Hussain, I said, thank you very much, that was very nice. And when we went outside, I said, I had to ask this. I said, Mullah, aapne 12 imama और 14 मासूमात को जिक्र किया था, क्या आप उनकी इसमत कुल्ली के कायल हैं या इसमत जुज़ी के कायल हैं? Mahmoud was with me as well, and he said, भाई साहब, जो कुछ मुझे पढ़ाया गया मैंने वही पढ़ा, और इसके बारे में कुछ नहीं कह सकता. He said that in English, we went to this meeting, and this mullah recited the dua, and he said, in the sadaqah of the 14 ma'sumeens and the 12 imams, and may people be blessed, and so forth. So when he finished, I asked him, Mullah, when you said the 12 imams and the 14 ma'sumeens, do you believe in their ismat juzi or ismat kulli? He said, look, I have been taught to read this dua like this. Brother, I do not know anything more than that. So I thought it's unfair if I say anything more than that. So it will be unfair if I say anything more than that. So even the Muslims, they use terminology which is unique to Shias. Terminology which is unique to Shias, like the 14 Ma'sumeens and the 12 Imams. Do they believe in the 14 Ma'sumeens and the 12 Imams the same way as we do? They don't know, because that is what the answer was. I don't know. So, terminology which we use, they use as well, but they don't understand the meaning of the terminology. The way we believe in the 12 Imams and the 14 Masums is not the same way as we believe. So they are using our terminologies in ignorance. And when you ask them, they don't know. Now, inshallah, we'll just finish in 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes. Just start the topic for tomorrow is this. I've been talking about hadith, how previous nations have gone astray and how this ummah has gone astray as well. And when I say this to people, they become very edgy, very jumpy on this subject. When I say Muslims went astray, they say, no, Muslims have not gone astray. I said, yes, you killed Imam Hussein al-Islam. That is the biggest gumrahi of all. The killing of Imam Hussein al-Islam and having his Ahlul Bayt taken captive, this is the biggest gumrahi. And yet they're arguing, no, we were not gone astray. But evidence is to the contrary, that Muslims did go astray. Now, on the topic of hadith and the changes which occurred in the hadith is this. The Prophet, I've mentioned this before, the Prophet was on his deathbed and the Prophet said, bring me a pen and paper. Mullah mentioned this as well. And then I will write you something down, you will not go astray. The people are actually negating the need for the Prophet's saying. They are actually negating the need of the Prophet's saying. That we do not need what you are saying, Hasbuna Kitab Allah. That the Quran is sufficient for us. And as soon as the first case which comes to Abu Bakr, the first case which comes to his court, the first thing he does is quote hadith. And this case is regarding Fadak. When Fadak came into his court, he did not rely upon the Quran. They said that Quran is sufficient, but what do they rely upon? They said, we heard the Prophet say that we prophets do not leave any inheritance. Who's saying this? Abu Bakr is saying this to Bibi Fatimah Zahra. He is not quoting any Quran. He is the only narrator of this hadith. Nobody else has heard this hadith. Neither Ali, neither Hassan, nor Hussein, nor Fatima. Nobody has heard this hadith. Only one individual, and whom it doesn't concern anyway. It has no relevance to him. And yet he is the one who's quoting this hadith. So when it comes to using hadith, they will use it when it's in their benefit. Now, I'll just give you one, and then inshallah I'll continue tomorrow. This is Al-Faruq. I have the Urdu translation if anybody wants to read it in Urdu. I have the English if anybody wants to read it in English. In this, it talks about hadith itself, the collecting of hadith, the narration of hadith, the criticism of hadith, the selection of hadith. The whole topic is covered by Shibli Numani in this. And Shibli Numani says, the first thing which Hazrat Abu Bakr does is this.